UN Resolution 2334 is one of the most devious and two-faced attacks on Israel since its creation. In its death throes, the Obama administration focused its energies on helping the UN to draft this resolution, a resolution that stabbed Israel in the back. As this resolution goes on and on and on about the 1967 lines, explaining what these are seems a good place to begin, so let's rewind to 1947. When the UN proposed the partition of the land, they envisaged a Jewish state, an Arab state, and Jerusalem was to be an international city, or in pompous UN language, a corpus separatum. In the UN's worldview, the corpus separatum, Jerusalem to you and me, would have been independent of both nations. This is really important to remember. Jerusalem was to be independent of both the Jewish nation and the Arab nation. Anyway, despite getting a duff deal, Israel agreed to the UN's proposal, declared independence, the Palestinians rejected it, the Arab world went nuts, and 8 Arab armies invaded, leading to the deaths of thousands of people. After around a year of fighting, Israel had miraculously survived, and all of the major warring parties signed armistice agreements, which is a fancy way of saying that they signed a truce. But truces only work when the warring parties agree to a boundary between each other, even if this boundary is only temporary. So Israel agreed with Jordan to an armistice line, which largely followed the proposed UN partition, with one major exception. Both Jordan and Israel held territory leading up to and including Jerusalem. There was no international city, just a divided Jerusalem. You're probably wondering why I keep talking about Jordan, but not Palestine. Well, after invading Israel, Jordan conquered East Jerusalem and the West Bank, ethnically cleansing the land of any Jews and forbidding them of residing or having citizenship there. This meant that cities and towns that had been populated by Jews for thousands of years were suddenly Judenrein. When Jordan conquered East Jerusalem, it was little more than the Old City, which was the holiest site in Judaism. The importance of this city to Jews is the reason there were twice as many Jews than Muslims, going back to at least 1860, and by 1946 there were 3 times as many Jews in Jerusalem. The city was irrefutably Jewish. So, Jordan conquered the West Bank, drove out the Jews, and declared it was now part of the state of Jordan. Forget occupation, Jordan had just stolen the land and there was no international outcry, just nods of approval from the US and the UK. Israel's survival was intolerable to its neighbours, and in 1967 they prepared to invade. Again. This time, Israel was ready and launched a series of preemptive strikes, miraculously surviving its predicted destruction. By the end of the war, Israel had driven the Arab armies from the places they'd launched their attacks, like Sinai and the West Bank, and this is how Israel came to control the West Bank to begin with, which takes us neatly back to Resolution 2334. This resolution declares that the UN underlines that it will not recognise any changes to the 4th of June 1967 lines. Wait a minute, did the UN Security Council just declare Israel's borders are the 1949 temporary truce lines between Jordan and Israel? These were temporary boundaries between Israel and Jordan. How on earth have they morphed into Israel's actual borders with Palestine, a country that has never existed, never mind had defined borders? But wait, there's more. The UN underlines that it will not recognise any changes to the 4th of June 1967 lines, including with regard to Jerusalem. What? Did they just declare Jerusalem, the city they originally proposed to be an international zone, as belonging to the Palestinians? The division of Jerusalem was a temporary peace agreement between Israel and Jordan. In declaring that the old city of Jerusalem is Palestinian, the UN is awarding Israel a few suburbs to the west of the city and denying Jews access or sovereignty to their holiest city, which they founded 3,000 years ago and held a majority population for centuries. The UN of the 1940s understood and recognised the importance of Jerusalem's holy sites to all religions, and they acknowledged that the city had a Jewish majority and a diverse demography of Jews, Muslims and Christians, which is why they originally proposed it to be an international city. So how can the UN of 2016 get it so wrong? They are literally undoing decades of peace talks by promoting the perverse idea that the holiest sites in Judaism belong to the Palestinians, and that Jerusalem was somehow historically a Palestinian city. The proposed international city was destined to fail, just as a divided Jerusalem along the 49 armistice lines is destined to fail. The only solution is for Israel and the Palestinians to hold peace talks, not for foreign powers like the UN to impose borders on the region. It gets worse. The UN goes on to declare that they are condemning all measures aimed at altering the demographic composition, character and status of the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967. So, Israel, an ethnically diverse state where Jews and Arabs have complete equality, is accused by the airheads at the UN of trying to alter the demographic composition of the West Bank by allowing Jews to live there. Are they mad? Jews had lived in the West Bank for thousands of years until they were ethnically cleansed from the land by Jordan. Take Hebron, a town in the heart of the West Bank, which was home to an ancient Jewish community until they were massacred and driven out in the 30s and 40s, then forbade from residing there by law. It wasn't until the Jordanian occupation had been crushed that Jews were able to return to the property that they already owned. The UN accuses Israel of altering the demographic composition of the West Bank. The chutzpah! The UN has stumbled into one of the most complex conflicts on the planet, and in doing so have made peace even harder to achieve.